Can you all hear me okay? Okay, good. I genuinely think that the UK entry is like the only good entry at Eurovision this year, and I've never been able to say that before, so I'd appreciate your vote. Okay, so good morning. It's the first session of the day. Daniel's done a great job at waking you up a little bit, but I thought we'd kind of try and wake up a little bit more. So after 3, we're all going to say together really clearly, TAP, NEXT, SLIDE, okay? Ready? 3, 2, 1. Okay, it doesn't work. I've done this 3 times now. It never works, but I thought it was fun anyway. So, tap next slide. It works when I do it. So, as Daniel mentioned, today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, so I really appreciate being a tiny part of that by being able to speak with you all today. It's obviously accessibility is super important and something we should always be considering, but it's always great to have like today as a way that we can kind of recenter ourselves and remember and think about all of the different options that we can make our apps accessible. One other thing I am part of for Global Accessibility Awareness Day is my friend Clemens and Michaela, who I think is around somewhere. We've got a podcast out today with our friend Daniel DeVesa-Dirksen Starts and Paul Hudson on their Swift Over Coffee podcast, where we're talking all about ways that you can kind of improve accessibility within your apps. So I'd really recommend checking that out when you get a chance. And as Daniel mentioned, if you haven't already, please download the iOSKonf app. If you already downloaded it before about lunchtime yesterday, update it as well. If you go to the agenda, day 2, and find my face and tap on my face, you can enable location permissions, and then you can get involved a little bit in this talk later on. And thank you very much to Monica, who kind of listened to my silly ideas and helped me out with getting this into the app as well, so I really appreciate that. So let's talk about some touch-free touchscreens. Sorry, shall I go back? Is that what you wanted to? Good. So touch-free touchscreens. So those of you who are kind of the similar vintage as myself may remember a time before multi-touch, but even if, well, I know Peter does. So even if you are old enough to be lucky enough to remember a time before multi-touch, it's kind of difficult to remember because they're so ubiquitous. Like, we're so used to interacting with our phones using multi-touch. They're kind of difficult to remember how revolutionary it was when it was completely new, because it really unlocked this whole new way of computing on smartphones and tablets and things like that. Smartphones before that were kind of really awkward. You had a tiny little keyboard, or most of us just had what we'd call a feature phone that sort of didn't do all this cool stuff. But multi-touch allowed the UI to change underneath you, and you to do different gestures and things like that. So that it's super cool even now. But it's not the only option. On iOS, you've got things like Siri and keyboard shortcuts, full keyboard access. You can use sounds and movements and your voice and things like that to control your device as well. So why should we support non-touch interactions? First of all, power users. This device in the image is a product from Nintendo called the Power Glove. And the idea was it was a controller that you could wear on your arm, and you had like a pad on your forearm that you could use, but you could also control games using your fingers as well. And it looks super cool. The reality was nowhere near as cool as it looked, because it was really fragile, and there wasn't really many games that supported it, but I still think it's super awesome. And yeah, this was like a kind of, I guess, an early venture into sort of augmented reality kind of stuff. But yeah, power users, they want to get things done quickly and ergonomically. So they're really going to benefit from having different options. And for accessibility users, this is a gentleman called Ian McKay, who I'll tell you a little bit more about later on. Yeah, it allows them to use your app in a way that works for them. But that's really the same thing, right? It's all about just allowing people to interact with your software the way that they want to interact with it, meeting your users where they are. So why is it important now? If you happen to already know who I am, it's probably because at some point you've heard me talking, or you've read something that I've written about accessibility. I really love mobile accessibility. It's what I've done for a while, and I'm always love talking to people about it. So I apologize if I've kind of told you that you're doing it all wrong, and you should be kind of thinking of other things that you're not already doing, but that's the kind of thing that I love doing. Part of that extends to reading incredibly detailed, very boring reports with lots of stats and numbers in about accessibility. This is from a report from Lloyds Bank in the UK. They do a report every year on what they call essential digital skills. It's essentially digital literacy, and they measure the level of digital literacy within the UK. And the good news is it's pretty high, but there are different aspects where that kind of drops off. So people with any kind of disability is lower than the population as a whole, and that goes down to people with a physical disability here, where they kind of have the lowest level of digital literacy. And the good news is that that is improving. There is an improvement here for people with sensory disabilities, so that's people who can't see or can't hear, maybe as well as the rest of us might be able to. And there is quite a marked improvement there over the last few years. And there are improvements for people with physical disabilities, but it's much lower, and actually they've been overtaken by the level of digital literacy for people with sensory impairments. And the report has a suggestion as to why that is. They say there has been technology improvements for those with sensory impairments, such as more widespread tools as standard within Microsoft Word and Google Docs, in contrast to expensive standalone products such as Dragon Naturally Speaking. I'll translate that for you, because out of the context of this incredibly detailed report, it sort of doesn't really mean a whole lot. So my reading of that is this. The COVID pandemic caused us to focus on building features into our apps for users with visual impairments. For example, making sure apps work with VoiceOver. But we haven't extended the same level of consideration to those with a physical disability. That's not to say that you shouldn't consider VoiceOver, just that maybe we need to start thinking about other options as well. So I thought we'd look at some non-touch options. And before we start, this is a really high-level introduction. All of the things I'm going to talk about today could be a whole talk in themselves, and if one of you wants to do that talk at some point, I would absolutely love to see that. All of the features that I'm going to talk about work on both iOS and iPadOS. Even that one that you think is iPad only, I promise you it works on iOS. If you take just one thing away from this talk, and it's going to be hard not to because I'm going to say it a lot, use system controls and style them as you need to. So let's start with pointers. This device is a device that they mold your mouth and then they make it specifically for your mouth. It fits into the top of your mouth, and it's a trackpad that you control with your tongue. They market it as like a time-saving thing for people who are so busy that they can't even use a mouse. But actually, for people who physically might struggle to use a mouse, this is a good option as well. I always struggle over this bit because mouse and mouth are really close together. And I say the wrong word, but I managed it that time. So you can control your iOS device with a pointer using a mouse or a trackpad or a pointing device like a trackball or a mouse pad. The iOS pointer works similar to a mouse cursor on the Mac, but there are some changes to focus management that make pointer interaction simpler on iOS. All of your buttons and your controls support the pointers by default, but the behavior is kind of okay, I guess. So I'm using a trackpad here, and the pointer is a small round dot. It's kind of light there on the dark background. As I move it into the button's got a light background, so the pointer changes color, so it's got a reasonable contrast on it, and then I can click and it activates it. So, it works. But with one really simple change, we can really improve that. So there's a modifier, hover effect modifier, and as I've applied that to this button, and as I move the pointer in, the button subsumes the pointer, and you get this really nice kind of highlight and parallax effect as I move the pointer around. There are two hover effects, lift and highlight. Lift you would use for buttons with a background like this one, and highlight buttons without a background where it just highlights the clickable area. So just one modifier, and we can really improve that. There's a few caveats, a few issues I find are kind of common with supporting pointers, and a lot of those are around button sizing. So if you have a small button, it often scales quite a lot. Or if you have a button that absorbs touches from a large area, it kind of looks a bit weird when you hover over it and you've got kind of a really big highlight area. So just things to be aware of. And through the magic of modifier ordering in SwiftUI, you can apply a clip shape after the hover effect modifier, and it clips the hover shape. So I absolutely love that animation as the pointer kind of morphs into that large circle. But again, because it's a clip shape, you can pretty much use whatever shape you want. You can do some really nice stuff with that. Because pointers are built into iOS and you get all of that support given to you, it enables other features such as eye tracking. So I'm going to enable eye tracking now. And this takes a moment to set up. So you're going to kind of watch me looking a bit weird and crouching over my iPad for a little while. This is the same technology that is used in visionOS. The difference, I guess, with visionOS is you've got loads of cameras and loads of sensors. The iPad obviously only has the one camera, so it's not as accurate, but it does still work. What I'm doing here is, as the dot is moving around the screen, I'm following it with my eyes, and then as the dot gets smaller, I'm just staring at the dot, essentially. And it's using this to calibrate how my eyes move and how I focus on things. Sometimes this works brilliantly, and sometimes it just goes all over the place, so let's see how this works. Okay. Okay. It doesn't want to get rid of the control center. There we go. So, okay, so now you've got a larger pointer, because your eyes aren't quite so accurate. And as I'm moving my eyes around, that's moving around the screen. And to target a button, to activate a button, you just kind of stare at it. This is really off to the right for some reason. It's not very well calibrated. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it this time. This is really difficult. I can't do it, I'm sorry. It varies in how accurate that is. Sometimes it works brilliantly, but a lot of the time it's just all over the place. Obviously, for the Vision Pro, it works way better. Keyboards. You can connect any kind of keyboard, standard keyboard, to an iPad or an iOS device, USB or Bluetooth, or the device I'm using is this one, which is made and designed and sold by Apple. The keyboard case, it's got a trackpad built into there as well. Keyboards obviously allow for faster text entry, but you can also use them to control your app. So your controls aren't focusable with the keyboard by default, but you can add it, again, just with a single modifier, with the focusable modifier. So as I hit Tab, I haven't applied the focusable modifier to that central button, but I have to the ones on the right and the left. And you've got that focus indicator around them, and then I can activate it with Enter. You can add keyboard shortcuts to your controls as well. Using the keyboard shortcut modifier, you pass in the letter that you want for your keyboard shortcut. The default modifier key is Command, but you can pass in different modifier keys if you want. And if you're using a standard keyboard command, you can use an enum, and iOS will then localize those for you where appropriate. And you need to make sure all of your controls have an accessibility label. And the reason for that is I've forgotten the keyboard command. What am I doing? That one. I can hold the command key, and it will show me all of the keyboard commands that are available on screen at the moment. So this is, in macOS, you'll have the menus at the top, and you can discover keyboard commands by clicking on the menu, and it will show you what the keyboard commands. You can't do that on iOS, so instead you hold the command key, and it shows you all of the ones that are available at the moment. So I've got command left will go backwards a slide, and command right will go forwards a slide. Full keyboard access is an accessibility feature. And this one, you don't need to do anything to support it. If you're using standard controls, then your app will already support it. It's an accessibility feature. So You can enable it in settings. And again, if you're using buttons, then I've not done anything to these. These are just standard buttons. There's no extra modifiers. And I can use tab to focus on those. The slight difference with standard keyboard nav is I'm using space to activate it, but essentially the same thing. And because this works with all buttons, you can see I've got some special hidden buttons here which didn't show up when I was navigating with the keyboard because I hadn't made them visible. But with full keyboard access, they're visible by default. You need to remember, though, that you should add user input labels, particularly for hidden buttons. So this hidden button that I've got here, to go to the next slide, there's no visual label for it. So I need to add a visual label that people can input. And you want to add synonyms for that as well. And the reason for that is that I can search using Tab F, and I can search for controls on the screen. So I can type next. It highlights the next button, and I can go to the next slide. Switches are an external hardware that you can use to control everything on the iOS screen. There can be these switches can be keyboards, buttons, sounds, physical gestures, or specialized hardware. So this is Ian McKay, as I mentioned earlier. He's a keen cyclist and loves to get outdoors. Unfortunately, he had an accident a few years ago on his bike, which meant that he no longer has control from below the neck. But he still loves to get out in nature. He has this specialized wheelchair, and he's got his iPhone there mounted to the wheelchair. And he loves to get out and take photos with his iPhone. And he uses a piece of hardware called a suck blow tube, which you can kind of see from his mouth there. And that allows two different commands, right? He can suck on it or he can blow on it. And the iPhone will pick that up as two different commands. So that allows him to navigate his phone and take photos. So switch control, again, is an accessibility feature that you can enable in settings. I've got a few different switches set up here. I say Ian will have the suck blow tube, he'll have suck and blow. I've got tab to navigate between my controls. Again, any standard control in iOS will support this. And if it doesn't, it's probably because you've made something custom. And then space to activate. And because this is your only way of interacting with the device, there's a load of other options. So you have to press a second time to activate. It's the same thing. But as I say, there's loads of different options. I've set it up to work with the keyboard. You can also do, I call this one crabbing. So I'm pinching with my left hand to navigate through each one, and then I pinch with my right hand to activate. Or you can use sounds. This didn't work earlier. It doesn't like the PA. Sorry. Sometimes it doesn't like the sound coming from the PA. But you can navigate with, we'll go to the next item, and we'll activate it. And this is the point where I touch the screen. The one point in the talk where I have to touch the screen, because you can't turn off switch control so easily otherwise. Voice control allows you to speak commands to your device. So remember earlier when we asked the iPad to tap next slide. So voice control, again, it's an accessibility setting. Like full keyboard access and switch control, it provides you access to all of your standard controls. If you've made custom views into controls, then you might find that doesn't work. And you need to make sure all of your controls have input labels set as with full keyboard access. The reason why, show names. Show names. So this button over here on the left, I've given an accessibility input label of light, because that's kind of what the button is. And you can see I've got next and previous as well. The button in the center has no accessibility label at all, so there's nothing I can say to activate that. So there's no way of me triggering that. The button on the right I've not applied an input label, so it's taking the name of the SF symbol. And this is a super common issue with accessibility on iOS. If you're using a control with an SF symbol, it's going to take the SF symbol file name, which is, it's an identifier, right? It's not meaningful to the user, so you shouldn't be presenting this to your user. So make sure you've got a user input label, particularly if you're using a control that doesn't have a text button. Tap next slide. Hide names. Okay, so remember that one thing. I mean, you know, I've said it basically repeatedly, right? So you'd be not doing that well if you didn't remember it. Use standard controls. This is a button that I've created just using a SwiftUI image. And it kind of works, like you get the same sort of behavior from it. I can focus on it and interact with it. But even then, it doesn't give you the same kind of stuff as you'd get from a regular button. But to do that, I had to add all of this code, so all of these lines of code. And not writing code is always good, right? So that's a lot of code you get to avoid if you just use a SwiftUI button. All of those technologies that I've talked about should be supported in your app by default already. If they're not, I guess I've given you a backlog item. But all of that stuff, you should make sure that your app will support them. But I thought maybe we could talk about some other fun things that we can add in. So game controllers. We all have used a game controller like one of these, right? Well, iOS supports these out of the box. You just need to build support into your app. This particular game controller is the Xbox Adaptive Controller. It's a version of this, but with the controls adapted to help people who need to use a bit less physical effort to control the game. It allows them to use the game. If you know what it's like to play a console game with one of these, right? Imagine if you were playing a console game and your only interaction was to use a mouse, or only interaction was to use a touchscreen. It would be pretty awkward to play, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about here, just allowing people to use the input device that is right for them. Game controllers, it's not going to work for every app. It's not going to be suitable for every app. You do need to listen to every event and then do something on that event. But you can see, as I'm kind of moving the buttons here and pressing different buttons, it's picking them up. And I mean, maybe you want to do something better than just kind of highlighting them on a screen, but you could do some pretty cool stuff with that, I think. iBeacons. Caitlin, you mentioned iBeacons in your talk yesterday. There's some really cool stuff you can do with iBeacons. Bonus points to anyone who can get the relevance of the image I've added on here. iBeacons, they're Bluetooth low energy devices, and you can use them to indicate fine-grained location. I think your example yesterday was about using them in retail stores, right? I've seen them used in food court kind of areas. So when you get near to a vendor in a food court, you get the menu for that vendor rather than having to browse all of the menus. iBeacons are actually pretty simple to set up in your app. There's not a whole lot of code to it. You define the iBeacon, well, you ask permission, first of all. You define the iBeacon that you want to look for, and then you tell the location manager to start looking for it. And then when it finds it, it gives you a call back on the delegate, and you can do some cool stuff. So this is the point where you get to open your app. So if you go into the app and find my page on the app, and it says find Rob, and you should be able to, it will tell you how close I am, roughly. So can you all see that? As I move around the room, it should kind of, hopefully, change a little bit. Some nice photos of the airport. How's it going? I'm close. I'd be worried if I were you. What does that one say? I put this in as a warning, so if you find during the break you're too close to me, you can move away so you don't have to talk to me. Also, I need to get my steps in. So, app intents. Hopefully, a lot of you got the opportunity to join in Daniel's workshop on Tuesday. I did it a couple of months ago. It's a fantastic workshop. If you haven't done it already and you get the opportunity to join Daniel's workshop on app intents, I really recommend it. If you take two things away from this talk, the second one should be to support app intents. App intents vends your app's most important features to the system, to iOS. And because it exposes them directly to iOS, it allows iOS to kind of interact with it in loads of different ways that your app can't know about. So you can trigger them with Siri or external triggers like NFC, location, time, when you receive an email, connect to a Bluetooth device, recognizing a sound, or, for example, when your friend Clemens sends you an iMessage. This is a simplified version of Daniel's code. I hope you don't mind me stealing that from you. This is how you create an app intent. You see, there's not a whole lot of code there. You do have to do a bit of setup to kind of wire them up. But to create a basic app intent, it's not a ton of code to do that. And then you can provide that to Siri. Just by providing a bunch of strings that your user might want to speak to trigger that app intent. And then once you've done that, it's available within shortcuts and for a Siri utterance. It just allows people really quick interaction to the most important things within your app. There are other options as well. You can create custom external accessories that connect via USB or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. I was speaking to someone yesterday, I think, was it you, Peter? Where you were potentially like creating prosthetics that might connect to an iPhone, right? That's pretty cool. HomeKit sensors. People with disabilities often really love HomeKit sensors because it massively cuts down on the amount of effort it takes to do something. Imagine your blinds automatically closing when the sun goes down. The other option is to, you have to get up and you have to move across the room and you have to use physical effort to close a curtain, right? I know that's not a big job, but for someone who physically struggles with movement or movement is painful, that's quite a lot of effort. And so HomeKit sensors really help with that kind of thing. And responding to push notifications. We've all built push notifications into our apps at some point. You send a payload to your app in response to a certain trigger, and your app can do something as a result of that. Well, that's a way of interacting with the app with external stimulus. NFC. If you find me during one of the breaks, I've got a different NFC tag on my badge to everyone else. There's another feature in the app, on my screen on the app. If you come up to me during one of the breaks and scan my NFC badge and show me, I will give you an NFC tag that you can then use for your own projects to try out some cool stuff. The only thing I ask is don't be weird, like come and say hello first. Don't just like reach over and scan it. So in summary, supporting external accessories allows any of your users to achieve the things that are important to them in the way that suits them. All of your apps should support voice control, switch control, and full keyboard access. And if your UI is built correctly, then it probably already does support those. With a little extra work, you can make some really powerful interactions with pointers and keyboards. Supporting external hardware like game controllers and iBeacons is pretty cool, but it does require some extra work. Use system controls and style them as you need to, rather than creating controls from scratch. And adopt app intents for your app's key features. Actually, there's one other way that I didn't mention, QR codes. Thank you very much.